Hello and welcome to another video. The railway lines in the north of Okayama and Hiroshima prefectures are very local, but they're wonderful for precisely this reason. Two of the longer distance lines in the area are the Kishin Line, which links Hiroshima and Niimi in the north of Okayama prefecture, and the Kishin Line, which links Niimi with Himeji. Many railway lines in Japan are named using kanji characters to denote the places they link, and the Kishin Line is no exception. It takes its name from the kanji ki, which is used in the name Himeji, and shin, which is used in the name Niimi. And before you ask, I know that there's no ki sound in Himeji, nor any shin sound in Niimi. It'd take a whole separate video to explain this, so for now, let's just say kanji are complicated, and we'll leave it at that. Anyway, I take trips on the Kishin Line, especially between Hiroshima and Bingo-Ochiai, relatively frequently, but I don't get the chance to travel on the Kishin Line, the line east from Niimi, so much. So, today, I decided to travel part of that line, the section from Tsuyama west towards Niimi. When I got to Tsuyama station, a train for Okayama was just leaving. The line from Tsuyama to Okayama is itself a fairly local line, but it does have a frequent service to the prefectural capital. There's at least one train an hour, with two an hour at some times during the day. The other lines from Tsuyama are very different, though. The line west to Niimi, east to Himeji, and north to Tottori all have just a handful of services a day. It's no secret that closure is potentially very much on the cards. So one reason for this journey today was to take a trip on this line while it's still possible. Another reason was to visit the little town of Chugoku Katsuyama, partway along the line. But that's another story, and actually, it'll be another video, I'd say. Anyway, starting the journey, I took the 7:11 train from Tsuyama to Chugoku Katsuyama. It left on time, of course it did, it's Japan, and on the train was the driver, me, and one other man. Two carriages and two passengers. Even for an early train on a Sunday morning, that's not a very good passenger to carriage ratio, I would say. And nor is the line between Tsuyama and Niimi any sort of isolated case. In so many parts of the countryside in Japan, local lines join places where few people live and fewer people need to commute by train. As my train made its way towards Chugoku Katsuyama, a trickle of passengers got on at some of the intermediate stations, but it was noticeable that almost all of them were high school students travelling to school. And as the birth rate decreases in Japan, it doesn't take a genius to work out that if a line is sustained primarily by students, its long-term future cannot be bright. As the train made its way out into the countryside, to the left, an early morning mist, almost a fog, still hung on the hills. But to the right side of the train, over the fields, the sky was already blue, indicating another hot summer day. We're not actually out of the rainy season officially yet, but the heat and the summer clouds would certainly seem to suggest otherwise. A while after leaving Tsuyama, the train arrived at a station called Mimasaka Ochiai. The station itself was fairly unremarkable, but I like the name. Mimasaka is the name of a region in the northern part of Okayama. But more than that, I like the name Ochiai. You see it quite often in place names and station names, especially in rural areas. It literally means falling together, but it seems generally to be used to indicate somewhere where routes, or in the case of railways, lines, join. It's not a physical junction so much as a location where paths come together. To me, it invokes the old routes through the hills and fields, linking the small settlements of ancient times. At Mimasaka Ochiai, about 20 or so high school students got on the train, and the service started to feel a little busier. It was interesting to see that the boys invariably went to the second carriage, while the girls came into the front carriage. And at the stations after Mimasaka Ochiai, there were groups of students at every station. Judging by the uniform, all heading for a high school in Katsuyama itself. It really is no exaggeration to say that students are the lifeblood of lines like these. In fact, it's tempting to say that services like the one I was on, early in the morning, are for high school students. If there were no students, the service wouldn't run. By now, the mist of earlier in the journey had completely burnt off, and it was a beautiful blue sky summer morning. Beautiful from the air conditioning of the carriage, that was. When the train arrived at Chugoku Katsuyama station and I got off, it was exactly 8 o'clock in the morning. Only 8 o'clock in the morning, but the heat was already stifling. I had a full 3 hours until the next train onwards to Niimi, so I had a look around the station. Then I had a stroll into the town and wandered along the street of traditional buildings, but, as I said, that'll be another video. Having looked around the town, I got back to the station with a full hour and a half until the next train. There was nothing to do. No trains to watch, even. It was wonderful. I sat on a bench on the platform and had an ice cream. You can't buy a ticket at Chugoku Katsuyama Station, but you can buy an ice cream, albeit from a vending machine. And a good ice cream it was too. And after my ice cream, I just sat and watched the clouds go by. High above the mountains, the wind was obviously fairly strong, and it sent the clouds sailing by at a pretty brisk pace. However, in towns like Katsuyama, up in the hills, the surrounding mountains tend to send the wind over and above the town itself. This means that in summer, such towns can really be sweltering, with only the occasional breeze for relief. It was just like that today at Katsuyama. Still, when the breeze did come, it was like manna from heaven. I like stations like Chugoku Katsuyama. They obviously used to be semi-major stations, and in a sense they still are, even if only in the context of a line that is very much minor. But at the same time, for most of the time these days, they're quiet, somnolent, undisturbed. There's something very relaxing about sitting waiting for a train for 90 minutes on a hot platform in the early summer with nothing to do. The only movement was a trail of ants across the platform and the clouds scudding above, and the occasional call of a soaring kite and the metallic hum of the cicadas, still fresh for the year, were the only real sounds above the low hum of daily life. It was somehow infinitely peaceful. It made me think of the poem Adlestrop by Edward Thomas, and especially this part in the second stanza. The steam hissed. Someone cleared his throat. No one left, and no one came on the bare platform. In Katsuyama, too, no one left, and no one came. No one even cleared their throat. I found myself idly reminiscing about how, as a university student, I'd hiked once out from Oxford to Adlestrop itself. I remembered the station signboard, now in the village itself, but more than anything, I remembered the blister a new pair of hiking boots had given me. Adlestrop station is now long gone, closed way back in 1966, although the railway on which it stood remains open. It's hard, though, to see how this railway, the Kishin Line, can remain open in the long term unless circumstances change dramatically. Yet, so much is lost when lines like this do close. Financially, it might make sense to close a line, but railways, especially local railways, are about so much more than economics and finances. Taking students to school, transporting old people to hospitals and shops, bringing people from the cities back to visit families in the hometowns they left. Railways are threads running through the rural communities they serve, linking them together. So musing, I was surprised to find that all of a sudden it was 10:40 and the train to Tsuyama was almost due. Then, 15 minutes or so later, my train arrived. A single carriage train that was, it has to be said, surprisingly full. The section of the line from Tsuyama to Niimi is, if anything, even more rural than the section from Tsuyama to Tsuyama. Under a sky reminiscent of high summer, the train made its way through a landscape in which, as often as not, the only sign of humans was the railway itself. At other times, though, the view opened out into a bucolic landscape of farms and fields, the flat expanse of land intersected by rivers and streams, but always surrounded by the distant mountains. In a way, it felt ancient. It was easy to imagine the same settlements, the same lands being farmed, hundreds or even thousands of years ago. And all too soon, the rural landscape gave way to buildings and roads, the outskirts of Niimi, the end of the line. Niimi is a smallish city, and no sooner had the outskirts appeared than we were at the railway station. It had been a slow journey, over 4.5 hours for a mere 72 kilometres, but with lines like the Kishin Line, slow is part of the appeal. Not so much slow life as slow line. You know, that might just catch on. Anyway, that's about it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and as ever, I hope to see you in another video very soon. Bye for now.